Well, the time is just gone 8:26 a.m. and we continue taking a look at government and government spending. Now, as far as spending is concerned, this government is like a runaway train. And as long as you and I continue paying taxes, as long as the money keeps on coming in, the government is going to continue spending. But there are legal ways, and we're not saying break the law. But how do you pay as little tax as possible in protest against the government spending? We joined on the line this morning by Chief Economist of the Efficient Group, Davi Ruet. Davi, good morning to you, and as always, welcome to the show.
My pleasure. Good morning to you. Thank you.
Yes, Davi, this whole question surrounding government and government spending, like I mentioned, is like a runaway train without brakes, non-stop. It is just going on, continuing, and as long as the coffers are being filled by you and I as the taxpayers, it's going to continue regardless.
Yeah, maybe we should just understand, and we maybe have a little bit of sympathy with the politicians, understand how the whole system works. Remember, there is tremendous pressure on the state to spend money on all sort of things. Everybody wants money, more salaries for the civil servants at the moment. People want more roads. People want more this, more that. Everybody always wants more. And that of course is political pressure on the politicians. On the other side, nobody really wants to pay. So I don't want to pay tax. I think you don't want to pay tax, but we want something. And that is the dilemma. That is the inherent dilemma of politicians. Now, politicians, what they can do, they can fill that gap between how much they spend and how much they get in by way of taxes by borrowing this money. Unfortunately, in the case of South Africa, we've reached a point now where we have borrowed too much money. And the debt levels have reached levels that's become completely and totally unsustainable. But another problem is, if we all, politicians always tell us, if we all pay our taxes, we're all going to pay less. That is a lie. The reality is that if you look at politicians, you look at governments all over the world, if we pay more, they simply spend more. So my what I want to achieve is to get everybody to pay as little as possible legally, not illegally. I'm not advising anybody not to stop paying taxes. That's not the point I want to make. But don't pay unnecessary tax to the state, because politicians going to spend that and more. And the only way that we can prevent politicians or this runaway train from becoming a major issue is if we simply smother it, take away its fuel or take away its oxygen. And only by doing that can we get the politicians to keep a lid on spending. And what we're currently experiencing is exactly that. There's this huge pressure on the state to give increases to the civil servants, as an example. And the Minister of Finance, he's dug his heels in and he said he can't give more than 3% because we just don't have the money. So that's an example. So the Minister of Finance is actually taking a stance now because we run out of money. And it's for that reason, my point is it's our responsibility as taxpayers to make sure that we pay as little as legally possible to the state in order to force them to not to overspend and eventually get us into trouble like what we are at the moment.
Yes, Darby, and as you mentioned, there are legal loopholes that are available to taxpayers without getting into trouble. Because if this does not happen, or if this protest does not take place, this government is going to continue. And you make a point about the excessive government spending, but also at the same time, you mentioned that the more money the government collects, or if everybody pays their taxes, the less tax everyone pays. But at the end of the day, it is about government spending, because it's a reduction in government spending that will make tax reductions possible.
Yes, and we must ask the question, and this is a bit of a philosophical question. We must ask the question, so what is government supposed to be spending money on? What are those things that government should be responsible for? And it really depends on your school of thought, what you believe that government should be responsible for. But economists typically break that down into primary functions and the non-primary functions. And the primary functions of the state are things like, for example, defense and the police and the judiciary, and maybe you can argue maybe even infrastructure and so on. But there's absolutely no reason why the state should own an airline, is a very good example. Even Eskom, the power utility. The private sector can do that, and the private sector can do that very well. And this government has proved itself to be a highly inefficient in mismanaging our money. Imagine the state is taking, like I've said, about a third of what we produce in a country. They're taking it away from people that work very hard for that money, and they give this money, or the tax man, he takes this money from you and I, and he gives it to the politicians, and the politicians mismanage that. They spend it badly, and in many cases they simply steal that. So we have to prevent that. We have to put pressure on the politicians to use our money much, much wiser, and to use it much more effective. And of course, they must use the money for the benefit of the people in the country and not for themselves.
And I think, Davi, you and I have had this conversation before in terms of the social grants. And when one looks at 30 million people in this country receiving some sort of social support, and that is apart from the civil servants that are employed by the government.
Yeah, if we ask the question, yes, we have about 30 million people receiving a grant from the state. I think we as South Africans, we have a responsibility to make sure that our fellow South Africans don't die of hunger. We need to support and assist people that are in dire straits. I have no issue about that. We need to do that. And that's part of the reason why I'm against a tax boycott, because those many millions of people are actually dependent on us, the taxpayers, in some cases, to keep them alive, to prevent them from dying of hunger. So we should do that. But the real issue here is that the environment is just not conducive for economic activities, for strong economic growth. And again, because of government is not creating a friendly environment for business to do business in. And a social security system with more people on it is an example of a social security system that's not working properly, or of an economy that's not functioning properly. So the problem here is not supporting 30 million people on the grants. That's not the issue. The issue is that they cannot get somewhere, they can't do something else in the economy so that they can eventually not be part of the social security system. And I think that is the main issue. The economy is just not growing fast enough. And part of the growing number of people depending on the state as an example of a government that's actually failing the country and in putting the right measures in place for the economy to grow.
Yes, and also I think while we are talking about taxes, the question of municipal levies also come up, Davi, because this is extremely important. Last night, I actually hosted a show where the Gauteng High Court had actually ruled in favor of the Pietermaritzburg and the Nelson Mandela Bay Chambers of Commerce with regard to municipalities putting up a markup on what Eskom has been charging them. And a lot of this has got to do with some of the inefficiencies and inefficient cost structures within municipalities. So, it's not only about SARS, and it's not about paying taxes, but also looking at local services and local municipalities.
Yeah, indeed. If you look at who the taxpayers are in a country, we have a very narrow tax base, which simply means that very few people and companies in a country pay just about all the taxes. In the case of company taxes, less than 1,000 companies pay about 2/3 of company taxes. In the case of personal income taxes, approximately less than 200,000 people pay 2/3. Or about a third of personal income taxes. So it's a very narrow base of taxpayers. But, those people doing the paying of taxes, they actually pay double, because they pay for education, but they send their kids to a private school. They pay for health services, but they have their own medical facilities or medical fund. Or they pay for the police, but they make use of a private sector security company, and so on and so on. But you're absolutely right. It's not only national government, it's the local authorities as well. And there are many other taxes. Like, for example, if you pay for electricity at Eskom, that in a way is a tax, or part of that is a tax, because Eskom is also badly run, and Eskom belongs to the state. Another example, South African Airways, or the Post Office, or the NEL. The list goes on and list goes on. So don't think it's only the deduction from your salary that is the tax that you're paying. There are many, many other indirects and hidden taxes that you're also paying.
Well, Davi, as always, thank you for taking time out. And I know you stopped on the side of the road to have this chat with us. We do appreciate it. And we wish you well. Safe travels.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Davi Rood with us this morning, Chief Economist at the Efficient Group. And with that, we're going for a break. We come back. We'll be joined by Buddy Dwake.